Hello guys, let's do a flip through of the Mosdos Press Jade, and I want you to stick around until the end because I'm going to sit down and talk to you guys about how we use it, our schedule, all the things, and answer the questions that you guys put on the post that I put up about this. So when you get Mosdos Press, here are the things that you will get. You will get your literature, which this is the student literature. It has all of the anthologies that you will be reading. Then you will also have your teacher's edition, and it comes in 2 books. So you have teacher's edition book number 1, you have book number 2, and then you have the optional student activity workbook. And I say optional, we will talk about that a little bit later as well. So let's hop into this. I'm going to organize these so I can get to them. The first thing that we're going to look at is the actual book that has all of the literature in it. This is what your child will use every day to do their assignments. And this is just a book of various literature within it. In the front of the book, it has opal, ruby, coral, pearl, jade, and gold, and those are different levels, okay? And this is a part of the series. Within this series, in the front of the book, it's going to give you just a breakdown your contents here. So you have your short stories, you have a poetry section, you have nonfiction, 2 dramas, and an actual full novel within this book. When you get into it, it gives you kind of a brief summary of like short stories and fiction and what that looks like. And then it goes into a mini table of contents just for this section of the book. And there's super popular stories in here, like the Rikki Tikki Tavi story. There are a couple of others, The Strangers That Came to Town, some other ones that we've seen in different things that my daughter has read or read about are also in this book, which is really cool. So at the beginning of every single story, it's going to give you a blueprint for reading. It's going to give you an intro. It talks about the story. Then it's going to tell you the focus of this story and where it's leading you. Then a little bit of information about the author. It's going to go through, and the actual full story is here in this book, and you will have little notes at the bottom that give you definitions and things like that. But as we go through, she's reading the story, you have a word bank box. These are the words that go along with the vocabulary that is in the student activity workbook, and I'll show you guys that. So as you go through, there's more word bank boxes, and this is all of the reading for your child. And then when they get to the end of the reading, they have a studying the selection section. They have recalling, interpreting, concluding, examining fiction, thinking about fiction, and then a creative writing portion of it as well. All of these questions are based off of the story, and it really just helps your child to think about the curriculum or what they read and answer these questions. It's reading comprehension, just very in-depth in my opinion. And so you'll have these. And then it goes on to the next story. You have your blueprint again, your intro, your focus, anything about the author. You have your reading material. There are word banks at the bottom. And that is what this book consists of. It does the same thing when they get into the poetry section. See if I can find it pretty quickly. So here we are in the poetry section. And sometimes for one selection, they will have multiple stories. So here for reading, they have this poetry section. They'll read here. They'll go through and do another poetry story, which is probably all about the same. And then they'll go into studying this selection. So it says the title of one of them was When the Frost is on the Pumpkin, and then Smells. And it has the same format for each of those. The poetry sections are really short, obviously. A couple of pages for them, and then they go into the different ones. This also covered 2. And we'll talk about the format and how we go through these. My plan, we have not reached all of the poetry sections just yet. But my plan for going through the poetry and how we've been doing it with the other sections. So you just go through in that one. Then when you get to the back, it has those drama stories. And this one is The Voyages of Dr. Dolittle, and it's broken up into 5 sections, 5 parts, I believe, because it's a full story, a full novel. But here are your drama sections here. So you'll go into drama, and it gives you some background on drama. And then you'll do your blueprint for reading, intro, focus, all of that. And then it goes into the actual drama story. Still has your word bank for vocabulary. And then the same format when you get to the end of your drama, you have studying the selection, all of the same. Recalling, interpreting, concluding, examining drama, thinking about drama, and creative writing. It says creating and writing, but I call it creative writing. There's another drama story. And when you get to your novel, it's the same thing. Only thing about the novel that is different is that because it is broken up into different sections, it has you go over specific chapters. So you have your intro and you'll talk about chapters 1 through 6, or your child will read chapters 1 through 6. And then they will go through and they will do the same thing for each section and finish off with creative writing. Then it goes through the next one, chapters 7 through 15 here, and then the same thing, and then goes through the next section. So that is it. When you get to the back of the book, there is a short little glossary back here with all of the words that are in the word banks throughout the stories. This is where you have your anthologies, okay? So let's talk about the student activity workbook. This is not a requirement. Someone did ask me that question, but it's not a requirement. You could completely do this portion of it and not ever have to touch this. If you wanted to add in some vocabulary, graphic organizer, that is what this is for. So my daughter is currently obviously working through this, but in the beginning, it goes through all of the short stories. And then it has information for the nonfiction, drama, and novel. As you will see, when you get to the poetry sections, you do not touch the student workbook. There are no student workbook activities for the poetry section within the reading. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. So when you go through, I'm going to skip the pages that she has already worked on. I'll go somewhere in the middle. There will be vocabulary exercises. You always have vocabulary 1 and 2 as far as activities, and it just does different things. Crossword puzzles, fill in the blank, there's lots of different things. And then you go into your, this one looks like it doesn't have a graphic organizer. Yes, it does. Here we go. Then you go into your creative writing activity here. This creative writing activity is completely different than the one that you will see in this book. And if you want your child to write and they love to write, then great, you could do them both. It's totally up to you. You can pick, which is what we do. I let my daughter pick whatever graphic organizing, not graphic organizing, but whatever creative writing activity she wants to do between the two. She gets to choose those based off of her interest level, and it's worked out really great for us. So when you get to another one, here is your graphic organizer, and it's usually 2 pages for the graphic organizer. And then you move into the next reading assignment, and you have your 2 vocabulary activities. You have your writing activity, which usually takes up 2 pages, and then you have your graphic organizer. That is the format for this entire book. It goes through all of it. When you get to the section for the actual novel, it is still broken up the same way for the novel. So your child would go into, let me get to it here. I'm still in the drama story. Okay, for the novel, so for section number 1 or part 1, your child would have 2 vocabulary activities. They would have a writing activity, and then they have their graphic organizer. It's the same, and they go into part 2, same thing. 2 vocabulary activities, a writing activity, and then your graphic organizer. That is it for the student workbook. Same thing in the back, they have the glossary that's in the book as well that goes over the vocabulary words. And that's it for the student workbook. Okay, now let's hop into the teacher's books. This is part 2. Here is part number 1. This is done, I feel like, in a classroom format when it says, like, it'll say things like, you know, talk to your children, talk to the children, that type of thing. But it's easy to do one-on-one. A lot of people mention that it's set up for classroom format, but I feel like anything you do for classroom format, you can change over to homeschool, individual, one-on-one, small group. It's all about what you choose to do and your thought process on that. So it goes into and it gives you the breakdown of all of the different readings the same way, the contents and how they're organized. for each of them, drama novels, all the things. And then it has your scope and sequence, and it talks about the focus of each one of the pieces of literature that your child would be reading. So it goes through all of that. There's lots of that. I'll give you all of the specifications as far as the amount of stories and things like that once I sit down in front of the camera for you guys. But here are, it goes into short stories. Same breakdown. It almost looks and mirrors exactly like the student book. I'm gonna pull that one out too. Like almost exact. But the great thing about this teacher's guide is that in here, you have the story here. It's just a little bit smaller, but it's in the center of the teacher's book throughout the whole thing. All of the reading is there. So if you have time, which sadly I do not have time, but if you have time, you can read this story yourself to follow along with your child in whatever manner you choose. But here in getting started, so the teacher's notes are on the sides and the bottom, okay? So it's going to give you some instruction. For example, right here it says getting started. It says ask your students to recall a favorite book or story in which animals have human characteristics. Have them share responses. Inform the students that in the story, Rikki Tikki Tavi, the animals' actions and conversations resemble those of people. That's very easy to do to bring up to your child before they start reading this story. Also, intro. Initially, when I looked at this, I thought, oh, the intro here is the same as the intro here, but it's not. This is like a background, so you would want to read the intro so that you know what the story is about. And then this is additional background, and it also gives you as the teacher, the parent, additional information to discuss with your child to really get them thinking about what they are about to read. So prior to my daughter doing this, I read this section and it really helps me facilitate her getting started with this piece of literature. You guys, I have not read a single one of these stories that comes through this book at all. I'll be 100% honest. But this is very helpful in me getting a summary of what she's about to read and the direction that this curriculum is taking her and questions that it's going to be looking for her to answer. So that's helpful. Same thing with the focus. It is not the exact same thing that is here. It gives you additional background on a teacher's level. Whereas this is written for the child, this is written for the parent or the teacher, okay? Then you come into, it talks about the workbook tie-in, so you know what pages for the workbook, the student's edition, and then the teacher's answer guide as well, obviously. So going through here, we have summing up the plot. It tells you kind of what happened, summary of the plot, obviously. And it says he's discovered and saved by a human family. That's what's happening on this first page, and it goes page by page. It gives you a summary, summing up the plot, and then you have your guided reading. This is where you would ask literal questions and analytical. I do not stop in between my child's reading to ask these questions. We go back when she's done at the end, and then I will kind of ask her. There was a time that I did do that, but it became too much stop and go, and I found that it slowed her down with her reading because she is a pretty fast reader, but it slowed her down with her reading, and it just made it really choppy, so I don't do it that way. Literary components, it talks about and discusses over here, and it does this for every single page. So it sums up the plot for this page over here, sums up the plot for this page. You have your literary component, you have your literal and analytical questions down here, more literary components. Now, when you are looking at the literary components, they have numbers, and typically those numbers will correspond with what's here. So number 5 is talking about foreshadowing. It will go here, and it highlights and underlines the section in reference to the foreshadowing. Characterization, same thing, 6, and then it underlines here. So it helps you to know exactly where to go within the reading, so you're not having to search the full page to understand and get an answer of what they're talking about when you're talking about the literary components. This, as far as the literal questions when guiding the reading, one question here says, why do the parents allow Rikki to sleep on Teddy's bed? And the answer is they know Rikki will protect him from snakes. Very simple. These are not the same questions that are in the student's reading book for the end of each section. Completely different questions. So they're going to get a ton of questions about this literature, which is what I really like because they're not the same, they're not repetitive, and it really has your child think outside the box and really analyze the literature that they're reading. Same thing, it's the same format for every single page. Summing up the plot is at the top, your literary components and where you can find them within the reading, and then your guided reading. You have a literal and analytical on each page. Same format for every single thing. Now, when you get to the section where you're at the end, okay, so we've ended the story, here are the recalling questions. This is exactly what's in the book. These are the answers to those questions here. So for example, it says, what circumstances brought Ricky to the bungalow? This is so hard to read for me up here, you guys, because it's so small. And it says, who lives there? This is the answer to question number 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes it may say answers will vary, obviously. Over here, creating, writing, answers will vary. And it just depends on what you're going through. Interpreting, and then concluding. Examining fiction, here are your answers here. Thinking about fiction, they typically just have this one to where they can answer it. It's usually one question. It gives them a few lines, and then they have one question. Answers are going to vary. This is where the discussion piece comes in, and I talk with my daughter about that. She does answer these questions on paper. I usually have her do them in 2 to 3 sentences, if that's what it calls for. Or sometimes she started out, she would write 1 sentence, we would get to the question and answer it, and she would realize that she left out some things that she really didn't think about that were a big part of answering the question and analyzing the literature, which is okay. That's what this is about for us, is the growth process, okay? So it goes into the same thing for every literature piece, all through, same components, the same setup throughout the entire teacher's booklet, okay? Once you get to the back of the book, you will find the answers to your student workbook. That is where they are. Everything is here. Vocabulary exercises 1 and 2, graphic organizer. Obviously, there's no answer to the writing, because creative writing is just that. It is creative writing for your child, for them to decide what they want to talk about, how they want to talk about it, all the things. It's specifically for them. And so there are no answers to that, but it has all of the answers all the way to the end here, Dr. Dolittle part 6, okay? The same exact thing is here for part 2. It just has all of the additional stories. Same thing for everything here. It's written all the same. Even when you get to the full novel, this is The Voyages of Dr. Dolittle. It's the same thing. Also, in the back of this book, you will have the answers as well, from the very beginning, short stories, all the way to the end. So in both teachers' books, you get the full answers to the student workbook in both of them. I want to go to the poetry section and just show you guys that it does the same thing for poetry as well. Obviously, the poetry is going to be less. There's not as much, but they still have the same questions. The format is still the same for poetry. You still have all of the poetry literature here. Read through and answer all of the questions. All right, guys, that is it for the flip through of it. So make sure you stick around. We're going to do some chatting. Okay, guys, so you have seen inside of the Mosdos Press Jade, which is for 7th grade. So I'm going to give you guys background information that I didn't give you in the flip through. I had to take copious notes so that I would not forget things, mom brain. But my initial reasoning for choosing Mosdos Press was because I wanted to just really challenge my oldest daughter with her reading and comprehension. She does not struggle with reading whatsoever. If you follow the channel, you know she is a very avid reader and typically will read anything. But also, she does not struggle with comprehension either. However, when your child is just reading independent reads, I'll speak for my child or my children, but when they're doing independent reads and there is no comprehension challenge, there are no questions to go along with it, they're just reading, which is amazing. It really helps. It expands their vocabulary. Like if they can't figure out what a word is, they usually can use context clues to figure it out, or they'll come ask me, they'll grab a dictionary. Like it's a whole process. But they don't have specific questions to really make them dig deeper and think about the actions of the characters or whatever is going on in the story. And so that is one of the reasons why I wanted to choose Mosdos Press, so that we have a guided instruction on how to do that. Yes, I could very easily take some of the books that my girls read for independent reads and turn those into reading comprehension exercises. But for various reasons, which number 1, I don't want to. Number 2, I think it takes away from the fun when those independent reads are really books that they just enjoy reading. It takes away from some of the fun of that aspect, and I wanted something with more structure that I didn't want to create myself. period. So I searched high and low and I found Mosdos Press. If you've been here on YouTube or on the online, internet, there is not a lot of detail about Mosdos Press. And I had to really do some digging. I had to call the company. I also, because I just had questions, like I just wanted to know some things. And I looked online, I found different flip throughs of like when you go on like Rainbow Resources or christianbooks.com. I can't remember which one, but it's on their websites. They had additional pages for you kind of flip through. There's just limited information, but I researched this intentionally on purpose and compared it to a couple of other reading comprehension curriculums. And I actually ultimately let my daughter choose, and this is what she chose. So we went with it. I found it on Facebook Marketplace for a lot cheaper than if you buy it new, but it's also something that can be reused years and years and years. So it may just be an investment into your homeschool. But what you're looking at for this curriculum, since I'm talking about price right now, is if you get everything that we have, which is your book with the anthologies in it, the teacher's guides, and then also the student workbook, it's going to cost you about $170. Also, there's a portion called Test Masters, and this is an actual like a DVD, but it's called Test Masters, and it has vocabulary test as well as like unit chapter type tests to go along with the curriculum. I did not purchase that. I was not looking to test my daughter over anything. I just wanted her to have something to where she could really think outside of the box, expand her comprehension, and read, which is because that's what she loves to do. So in giving you additional background for us, we haven't ever used a formal reading curriculum, reading comprehension curriculum. Maybe we dabbled around in like maybe some like spectrum type reading books. That's pretty much it for her. And then she also did Moving Beyond the Page literature studies, which is kind of similar, I believe, but Mosdos Press to me is a lot more detailed. It has a lot more reading options, whereas Moving Beyond the Page, you buy one literature piece and you study that one, whereas in Mosdos Press there's a lot in there to go over. This is not a comparison of the two. We actually love both of them, and we have still some Moving Beyond the Page literature studies that we have not done that we will be doing, but just want to give you guys a background of what we have done as far as literature reading comprehension goes for my 7th grader. So in talking about Mosdos Press, it is not Christian, but I personally wouldn't say that it's more of like secular. I don't know. So I guess if it's not Christian, then it is a secular curriculum. However, the focus of this curriculum is on good morals and values and understanding right and wrong and decision making and why we do those things. That is what I really liked about this curriculum, because it has what I consider to be clean stories. I have not come across, and I've done research on a lot of these, I have not come across anything that for our family would not be acceptable to where my child would not be able to read it and understand it and learn about it. And that varies for every household, you guys, but there's just certain things that I don't want my child to find out and read in a book on a regular basis. And so I screen for specific things, okay? And I have not come across any of those no's in the Mosdos Press Jade literature curriculum. Another thing that you'll want to know about it is it is for 3rd through 8th grade. I did not find out about it until last year when I was just searching reading comprehension curriculum, and it popped up and I'm like, what is this Mosdos Press thing? So I didn't know anything about it. There are a few people on YouTube who talk about like maybe the 3rd and 4th grade levels, and I do think there are some slight differences in how the curriculum operates, but I'm not 100% sure. I did not research those levels, so I would not be a good resource for that. I'm going to tell you that up front. I am simply talking about Jade 7th grade and what this has looked like for us and how we're using it within this curriculum. As I showed in the flip through, I feel like it's designed for classroom style, but it's very easy to ignore your children, we have the students. To me, it's all just like verbiage. It doesn't set itself up to where you can only use it for a classroom or not transition it to homeschool, small group, one-on-one. It hasn't bothered me at all. If that's something that truly annoys you, that a curriculum is really probably designed for multiple students, and you can't flip that to change it to where it works for one student or two, then you may not want this curriculum at all. If you're looking for a Christian curriculum, it's not Christian, so you may not want it for that reason as well. But those are just things that I want to put out there because a lot of people are not aware of what it offers. But it does talk about, you know, right from wrong. Like, how do we know that this is wrong? Is this morally wrong? How do you feel about it? Great discussion. I absolutely love that portion of this curriculum. Okay, now I'm going to give you guys like specifics. It is a book of anthologies is what it's called, which is basically a collection of stories within one book. That is what this is, as I just showed you in the flip through. Specifically, the amount of stories and poetry items, things like that are here. There are 24 short stories, 39 poems, 9 nonfiction stories, 2 dramas, and 1 full complete novel. Okay, that is what you are getting within the book where you do the reading. So let's talk a little bit about what we do and how we're doing it. Currently, my daughter is picking between 2 and 3 stories per section. So I'm going to talk about the sections and then why we're picking 2 or 3. So within the sections for the short stories, it has a plot, character, setting, theme, and then putting it all together. She is picking, there are about 4 or 5 stories between each one of those sections. So for plot, she picked 3. For character, I think she picked 2 or 3. She's picking them based off of what she wants to read. Same thing for setting and theme and then putting it all together. There is not like a connection, so you don't have to read every single story in order for your child to understand how the curriculum is going to flow and what it looks like. It's just simply these are the stories and you talk about the specific plot and character and theme within the different stories. It just gives your child different stories to be able to compare plots for different things or characters in different things. That's simply it. There is no tie-in together to where you have to do every single story in order to understand what's going on. Also for poetry, it's the same thing. You have in the poetry sections, you have sound, language, form, theme, and putting it all together. And that's all related to poetry. There are, like I said, 39 poetry items or stories within this curriculum. We are just picking a few from each section so that she understands the sound, you know, poetry sound, poetry language, that type of thing. Also, when you go into nonfiction, there's human interest, there are biographies and autobiographies, and then also historical and adventure essays. Still, again, picking a few from each one. There is no way, if you wanted to finish this curriculum, even in 52 weeks, right? Say you're schooling year round, you don't take any time off, you would not be able to finish every single one of these. It's too much. There's too much reading. Even the full novel is broken down into like 6 sections. And based off of the schedule that we do, that's 6 weeks, okay? Just to give you an idea of how we're doing things and going through. And I'm going to run down our full schedule for you guys here in just a second. Then there's your 2 dramas, and then you have your novel. So our schedule as of right now is I have my daughter do vocabulary 1 exercise and reading on day number 1. That could be Monday, y'all. That could be Friday, whatever. Just day number 1 for that specific reading. And then day number 2, if necessary, she will complete the reading if she was not able to finish it on day 1. And then she'll answer all of the questions at the end of the section. Day number 3, she does vocabulary exercise number 2, and then she does the graphic organizer that goes along with it. So on day number 3, she's only in the student workbook. She's not reading anything. She's done with that portion of it. And then days 4 and 5 are set up for writing, the creative writing, whichever creative writing assignment she chooses. Sometimes, you guys, we don't do the creative writing assignment because she's working on writing with IEW. Some days, neither one of the creative writing assignments are things that really interest her or spark her creativity. So she doesn't do them. That doesn't happen often. She loves to write and she loves to read. So she can usually go with that and it's great. But sometimes she gets the reading done in day 1. She doesn't need to do reading for day 2. And she may spend that whole day answering the questions for day number 2. Or she may get done with the vocabulary and the graphic organizer on day 3. And when she's not doing writing, then she doesn't do anything days 4 and 5. It just depends. Sometimes we spread it out. Some of the reading is pretty long. There may be 10 pages for one reading exercise. And then for the next reading, there's only like a page and a half or 3 pages. It really just depends, but we try to stick to this schedule because I don't want her feeling like she's going to spend an hour and a half because she has to get the reading done on day one and do the vocabulary on day one. But we really do stick closely to the schedule. She reads really fast. We also have time to discuss. And so based on your child, I would say that's how you would organize your schedule. I'm going to link a video down below that Rainbow Resources put out for a schedule for Mosdos Press. It is a little different. I think that it's designed more for the maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th grade level, because there are some things that were in that video that are not in what we're using. However, it will give you an idea of what a schedule looks like and how they have it lined out, and you can base your schedule off of that. Trying to think, I'm going to answer questions that people put out for sure to give you guys an idea, and just answer those, because I feel like that's what the point of me doing this. So I want to make sure that I cover what people wanted to know. Basically, that's it for that portion. Let's move on to questions. So one of my viewers said, I'm so excited, which I'm so glad. So many people ask about Mosdos Press, and I'm really happy to share because in short, we really do enjoy it. It's great. It's doing exactly what I was looking for my daughter, and it works out really well. But the main question is, how much do you do each week with your kiddo, and do you try to do all the stories? I just went over the schedule. Typically, we do 1 story a week. Now, if the story is only 1 page, you guys, she can get that done in about 3 days and she'll move on to the next story. So that's why I said day 1 is not necessarily Monday. It could be Friday. It could be Thursday. It could be Wednesday. All just depends on the length of the story. If it's a 1-page story, she can get vocabulary done, read the 1 page, and answer the questions all on day 1. So then that leaves vocabulary graphic organizer on day 2, and then maybe creative writing on day 3. She is an avid reader and writer, so creative writing may not take her 2 or 3 days. It really just depends on other outside factors in her schedule. We take a look at it at the beginning of the week, typically Sunday, and then we plan it out based off of that. Or if she's going to be starting a new lesson on a Wednesday, then we'll look at it on Tuesday to get it planned out for however many days, the next 5 days, if that's what we're looking at. So it really just depends on that. We will not do all stories. As I said, she's picking like 2 or 3 from each section. There's no way that you could finish this entire curriculum in 1 year. It would be impossible, in my opinion. And my daughter reads a ton, but I would not even push that. If you were going to do it and you wanted to make this something that your child completed in a year, I would simply add in maybe a 1-page grammar exercise every day. You have vocabulary, which you can also use for spelling as well. Then you have your graphic organizer, which falls under your grammar, reading comprehension, that type of thing. And then this is your reading comprehension curriculum. If I were going to do that and try to finish all of the exercises, because that's all that you would have time for. But that is a complete ELA curriculum. You have vocabulary, spelling, you have your reading comprehension, you have your graphic organizer, and then you would just add in grammar work. It's possible. It is definitely doable for you to be able to make it a full curriculum. So there's that. I just thought about that. It's definitely something that can be done. Another person says, I don't have any questions. I just want to say that I'm doing the curriculum for the first time with her 3rd grader this year, and they absolutely love it. And she's surprised that not more people are talking about it and that it's not used more often. And I agree, because like I said, I searched high and low and I couldn't find as much information as I wanted to. There are some helpful videos, and I will try to link those down below too, so that you don't have to go down the rabbit hole that I did looking for things. But the next question was, how long does a lesson take? It really just depends. However, I advise my daughter never go over an hour. Never go over an hour a day on doing it. Our day number 2 typically tends to be a little bit longer because she answers the questions and then we have discussion. That was what I missed. So in the teacher's guide, which I showed you guys, there are those literal and analytical questions. And then also in the student booklet, there are questions that I just like to sit down and talk with her about. And so we take time to do that when she goes through the lesson. So that's usually on day number 2. And she and I will sit down and we'll discuss some questions. She does write the answers to the questions down if it's not an open discussion. But I like for her to do that, because then when I give her, we talk about what the correct answer is that the teacher's guide has. She's able to see what she wrote in comparison to what the book says. And that is growth. That to me, that's really helpful for her. So could you do it all orally? 100%. You could just have you and your child sit down and have a discussion about all of the questions if you wanted to do that. I think it's amazing. My focus for her is that she's working independently. And if I were to sit down and go through every single question with her in an oral form, I just don't have the time to do that. And that leads me to a question I know someone asked. It says, how teacher intensive is it? Would you recommend this for homeschooling more than 4 children? It depends on your involvement in the age of the child. If I had a, a third grader, fourth grader, so, and then maybe like a first grader and a kindergartner, I probably wouldn't have time. But as I said before, I don't exactly know how those levels are set up. And if the stories are as long, I can't really speak on that. But because my daughter is so independent, I don't have to sit and read with her. I don't have to answer the questions with her. She can do that, but we do go over them and we answer some of them orally. So depending on the age of your child and the level of independence for where they are, to me, that would determine whether or not you could do this with 4 children. I have 3 and I'm still able to work with her, but I don't sit with her the whole time. So if you have a child that you need to sit with them and read the stories with them and go through all of that, I personally would say no, because I would not have the bandwidth to be able to do so. Okay, let's talk other questions. How long does the lesson take? I think I answered that. I don't have my child go over an hour. And you can move at your own pace completely. And if you make it a full ELA curriculum, then you could commit, hour and a half to 2 hours. That's about how long it would take if your child were doing everything separately, obviously with breaks in there. But is the workbook necessary? No, it's not. If you don't want your child to have additional vocabulary work, graphic organizer, and creative writing, then you do not need the workbook in order to do this curriculum. You could completely go through reading the stories and discussing those questions and doing the creative writing that it's in here, and you never have to touch the workbook. That is completely an additional choice item. Do you make them write down all of the answers or do it orally? I think I just answered that too, but she does some writing down and then we do some of the questions orally. Do you follow all the questions that are asked to a T or more organically with the discussion on the stories? We go organically with the discussion, and sometimes we don't get to all of the questions. Like the literal in the book, the literal and the analytical questions, sometimes I will ask her those and we may not get to all of them. If they're too literal, too analytical, I may just do 1 and 1 for each section. Pick the one that I think is going to challenge her thinking the most, but that's all just me as a teacher. I look at it and I see where it's going and I'm like, I think we'll just touch on this question. Sometimes for the end of the questions, she may have 10 questions that she has to ask. So the literal and analytical portions of it, I may only pick 1. Sometimes I drop questions out, but you have the flexibility within this curriculum, and that's what I love about it. You don't have to answer every single question. Every question doesn't tie into the next question. So if you omit a question, your child's not going to be missing anything from that. You get to pick and choose based on what you want your child to do. You could say, I want you to do all the odd numbers today, and tomorrow I'll do all of the even numbers, or the next reading lesson, do all of the even numbers. You could say, I want you to do 1 through 4 this week, and then the next week you can do, 5 through 10 or whatever. It's all dependent on what you want to do. You can go through and pick the most interesting ones that challenge your child the most. That is what I tend to do. Sometimes she answers every single question. Other times I'm like, just answer these 2 because I think they will really have you think deeply about what's going on. It's all up to you. It's very, very flexible, and I love that. Other question. This says, really, this question could be for any reading curriculum. Do you stop on every page that asks the comprehension or extra teacher info notes as they read to discuss? No, I do not. I found, and I think I mentioned this in the flip through, but I found that it disturbed her reading when I did that. When I say, okay, let's stop, let's discuss this. And some children need that because they'll get to the end of the story and they don't remember a single thing that they read in the beginning. That's normal, that happens. But for her, she hangs on to it. So by the time she gets to the end of the story, I can still go back and ask her those literal and analytical questions, and she's able to recall that information and answer it correctly. So that would totally be dependent upon your child. And as I said, it's so flexible, you can do it however you want to. Also, does time allow for you to be able to do that? Because that means that you would be sitting there with your child, or they would read a page and you would have, maybe 10 minutes to go and do something else. And then they would say, okay, Mom, Dad, I'm ready. and then you answer questions. Then you have another 10 minutes. You come back, answer questions. I don't have time. I just don't have time to do it that way. So we kind of figured out a way that really works for us. And the curriculum is so flexible for you to be able to do that. You don't have to stick to any specific schedule or anything. Another question it says no question yet, but just excited because I've always liked what I've seen of their math, and I didn't realize they had literature. I did not realize that Mosdos Press had math. No clue at all, and I still haven't researched it, but I didn't know that that was even a thing. So I appreciate that person for commenting and adding that, because now I'm intrigued to see what their math curriculum looks like. So I think that's all of the questions that I have received from everyone. I hope that this was really helpful for you guys. We are really enjoying Mosdos Press, and we're going to keep using it. At the end of the year, I will give a full review of, maybe we come across some stories that we don't like or some things like that, or I don't know. I think it's great so far. So I'm just going to keep sharing. If you guys have any more questions, some things that I didn't touch on, put it down in the comments and I will answer those. Thank you guys. See y'all later.